Hi, in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how you can transform any design into a piece of textiles art. If you'd like to join in, the equipment that you're going to need for this project is a piece of tracing paper, a pencil, different colours of felt, different colours of embroidery thread, some scissors, and the first thing that you're going to need is a design or a design idea. I've done a digital drawing here, and as you can see by this drawing, I've labelled all the embroidery techniques that I plan to use as well. So you can see where my running stitch is going to be, my back stitch and my French knots, and what's going to be appliqued. This will just make things a little bit clearer for me if I take a break from this project and come back to it at a later date. Once you've drawn and labelled your design, it's time to make some tracing paper pieces. These tracing paper pieces are going to be used as pattern pieces, which will allow you to cut out the right shapes and sizes of your fabric so that you don't go wrong and waste any fabric. Trace your design by separating out all of the shapes that you're going to need. So don't trace it by copying it exactly. After you've traced one shape, move the tracing paper and then trace the new shape separately. Keep moving your tracing paper after each shape so they are all separate. This will be the best way to create pattern pieces for this project. Depending on the level of detail in your design, it might be a good idea to label your pattern pieces with the colours of fabric that is needed for each pattern piece. Now it's time to grab your scissors to cut out the pattern pieces. Once you've carefully cut out all of your pattern pieces from the tracing paper, you're going to start to pin those pieces onto the fabric. So, for example, here's a nice blue piece of felt fabric, and I have got a pattern piece which says blue on it, so I'm going to place that onto the pattern piece. However, I am not going to place it directly in the centre. I'm going to be as economical as I can, and I'm going to rotate it in a way that makes it fit towards the edge. That means that all of this fabric will stay free and clear of any cut out pieces, so I can cut out more pieces from that in the future. If I was to place this right smack bang in the middle, these two pieces at the side are smaller and it doesn't give me as much space to work on in the future. Now you've got two options here. You can pin your pattern piece to the fabric and you could just cut it out like that, or you could draw around the edge to make a mark where you want to cut. That allows you to be a little bit more precise. So I'm going to pin and then draw around. Now it's up to you. You can use a piece of tailor's chalk if you have some. You want something that's going to show up on your fabric. So if you were using a black piece of felt, you would need a lighter colour of tailor's chalk. A pencil wouldn't work on a black piece of fabric, but you could always just use the pinning method as well. I think this gives you a bit more precision. So when I take this pin away and the pattern piece away, you can see I've got a clear line where I can follow with my scissors. For some of my colours of felt, I've got more than one pattern piece for that piece of felt. Now, in my case, I've got very small pieces, so this isn't actually that important for me to do here, but you might have pieces that are bigger. So I'm just going to show you. Again, you're not going to place your pattern piece right in the centre of the fabric. You're going to place it towards the edge. That leaves all of the space for you to work on in the future. I might even put it a little bit lower. Be really sort of squash it in there. And then I'm going to place my other red pattern piece on there. I think I've got another tiny little red piece. Now some pieces are going to be so small that they're actually quite hard to work with felt. So I'm going to see if this is possible to cut a piece out that is this small, and if it isn't, then I will adapt my design and I will use satin stitch and back stitch to add these little feet. It's for the feet here. I'm going to pin them in place and draw around them. I think these two are actually too small to pin down. I'll just hold them in place as I draw and just be really careful to keep them still. So do this for all of your pattern pieces and then carefully cut out all of your felt shapes. Okay, so I just pinned all of my pieces together. I don't think I'm going to sew them with all the pins in this. I'm just going to attach one piece at a time, but it's just to show you, how it's all going to be held together eventually once it's sewn. There are things called fusible adhesives that you can use, and basically it's just like sticky back paper that you iron onto your fabric before you cut it out. I don't have any of that, but it would be good to use something like that if you do have it. And then what you would do is, while you've got your larger piece of fabric, iron it onto the fabric and then cut your shapes out of it, and then you can peel the back off, revealing the sticky side. And basically this makes these bits of fabric into kind of stickers, so you don't need to pin it then, and everything is held in place while you sew it. In hindsight, that would have been a really good idea, but I didn't do that. So we're just gonna unpin it and stitch them on piece by piece, and it'll all work out the same and it'll be fine. So the next step is to start sewing. We're going to use running stitch, back stitch, French knots, maybe a bit of satin stitch as well. The main stitches that are going to be attaching the pieces of applique together are going to be the running stitch and back stitch, and then I'll add some nice decorative satin stitch and French knots just to make it look a little bit more special. So if you'd like to keep watching, you can see me do that. So I'm just getting an arm's length of thread, or about 30 centimeters of thread. I probably will run out of thread as I'm sewing with this, but I'm just going to tie it again on the back and start with a new piece of thread. If your piece of thread is too long, then it'll be more likely to get tangled as you're sewing, and we don't want that. But also, if you're working in an environment where there's lots of other people in there, then you could poke somebody with your needle because you're reaching out with a really long piece of thread to pull it all the way through the fabric. So yeah, don't work with long pieces of thread for two reasons. I'm just going to tie this bit of thread at the end so it doesn't go all the way through the fabric when I pull it. There we go, that will stop it from going all the way through the fabric, and I'm going to go following my plan, and I'm going to do a running stitch for this, so it's going to look like a dashed line. I don't want it to be perfect. I've selected a thread that's a sort of a slightly different colour rather than a matching colour, because I want this to be visible. I want it to be a decorative feature. So just going to sew around using a running stitch. Those of you who've seen my other videos will have seen that I describe the running stitch as a kind of a dolphin moving through the ocean, because it goes up through the fabric, forwards, and down through the fabric again, kind of like a dolphin moving through the ocean, of the surface of the ocean. Try to keep your stitches even as well, an even distance apart and an even length. Just feel it looks neater. So just keep sewing. I've sped this up to make it a bit more interesting because I know you don't want to watch the whole thing, but you should take your time with this to make sure that you're accurate. pins because I don't want it to shuffle around too much. And do you know what, I think I'm going to add some other little pins as well, because otherwise we run the danger of having a piece that's sewn on like that, which we wouldn't want. So I'm just going to flatten it out, make sure everything's in place, and pin it nice and flat, and then it shouldn't warp or anything as I'm sewing it. It's a little bit more prickly now though, so I'll have to be careful. Pull this thread, you see here it's got like 2 bits of thread. I'm going to pull this a little bit shorter now, because you don't want to sew with two threads, just the 1 thread. So when you notice that happens, just do the same. Be really careful not to unthread your needle as you sew. You hold on to the eye of the needle, you know where the thread goes through the hole. If you hold on to that, then it won't come unthreaded. Okay, so I think that's a short enough piece of thread. So I'm going to pull it to the back, and I'm going to tie a knot in this piece of thread. When you have about this much thread left, you should start to think about tying off at the back like I'm going to do here. So I make it look like a little fish, I suppose, and then I bring the thread through the body of the fish. I create a little loop that way. Now for real control, what I will do is I'll put the needle into that bit, and you can see if I poke it like that and pull on this thread, I've got absolute control where that knot forms. So that's good. Okay, so now I've got a knot there and a knot there, holding the thread in place, and I'm going to cut it fairly close to the edge. Do not cut your knot off though, because then it's all going to come undone. Okay, so now I'm going to get a new bit of thread, another 30 centimeters or so, and I'm going to carry on with my running stitch around the edge as I have been doing. Don't forget to tie your knot in the end. And I can take that pin out now as well. I think I'll pop it somewhere safe in its little pin tin. Just a little reminder with running stitch, when you are pulling your thread through, you're not going to stop there, you're going to pull it all the way through till that loop goes away. So it wants to look as neat on the back as it does on the front, apart from those little knots, which will make it a little bit less neat, but you don't want big loops on the back. Okay, so I've just done my last stitch. I'm going to turn it over to the back. I'm going to tie a little knot. And look how neat that is on the back. So that's what we're looking for. So now I'm going to turn it back round to sort of match our original design. And I've added some different types of decoration on here. So still got a bit of thread here, so I'm going to add maybe some French knots, and then I'm going to do this is solid line, these are solid lines rather than dashed lines, so I'm going to do those with the back stitch because that gives that sort of effect. So I mean, I'm copying it roughly. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, you can use a bit of artistic license. I'm going to try and get it as close as I can, but I'm not going to get upset if it's not exactly the same. So to do a French knot, you might have seen my other videos, but I'll show you how to do this quickly. You hold onto your thread, you put your needle onto your thread, and you wrap it around 1, 2, 3 times, and then you bring it close to the fabric and back down. and that gives a little French knot effect. And I'm going to do another one here. Come up through the fabric, hold on to the thread, close to the fabric, put the needle onto that bit between your thumb and the thread, wrap it around 1, 2, 3 times, bring this close to the fabric, and then bring it back down through the fabric, very close to where you went down, and pull that through. I'll just do a few more of these. Turn it to the back, and you can see there's all the connections between those French knots. I'm going to tie a knot, doing it by hand here. I'm still going to use the needle as a little tool to control where that knot forms, like that. Snip off all of these little bits. Now, don't be tempted to cut these bits because the French knots will just fall off the front. So, you know, what you could do if you didn't want these lines, you could do a French knot, turn it over, tie a knot at the back, then do a French knot, turn it over, and do a knot at the back. But I don't really mind that. I think I'm quite happy with it like that. Right, so the next step is going to be to do the back stitch. However, I want to do, there's one French knot there, and I want to put that French knot there. So I'm going to start with a French knot, and then I'm going to do a little bit of back stitch and some swirls. If you feel more happy doing a back stitch following a line that you've drawn, you could draw the lines on the back and you could copy it that way, or you could even draw the lines on the front, but then you might end up with some lines that you can sort of see don't look so nice. So I'm just going to do it, like I say, as best as I can to copy what I've got, but I've got artistic license. So if it goes a bit wrong, I'll just say it's artistic license. So a back stitch is similar to a running stitch because you start off with a stitch like that, then you leave a gap and you come up like that, so that looks very similar. However, we call it back stitch because it goes back to where the last stitch ended, and you can see forwards and backwards like the hokey cokey, or the hokey pokey as Americans call it. It's the hokey cokey. What they're talking about, it's the hokey cokey. And there you go. You just sort of go forwards and back like that, and it creates a solid line. I like that I've chosen a colour of thread that sort of stands out. If I was using this thread, there would be no point in doing all of this decoration because you wouldn't see it. So think about if you want colours to show up, if you want them to be decorative, or just to hold things together. I'm going to tie a little knot here. Get rid of this. And do another swirl somewhere else. So you can watch me do a few backstitch swirls now. Okay, so I've used a kind of a, not exactly a contrast colour, but a colour that stands out for the decoration here. Sometimes you might want to just use a matching colour, so you're not doing a decorative stitch, you're doing a functional stitch, something that is going to hold it in place. So I have chosen a black thread to sew onto the body of the puffin, and I'm going to use a running stitch to attach this. This, I think I'm going to use the black thread again, just because I think it adds something of interest to do a little running stitch. So I'm always thinking about decoration and how things are going to look as I'm sewing them, and it is on my design plan to have a black line for this. So I'm going to make this very careful, smaller stitches. I decided to attach the paintbrush using a different type of stitch. I used a satin stitch because I felt that it showed the texture and the effect of the wood of the paintbrush handle better than any of the other types of stitches. So I'm always trying to think about the aesthetic of the stitch that I'm using and how it's going to affect my design. A satin stitch is created by bringing longer stitches, zigzagging your way across to fill a space. It's kind of like a colouring in stitch. I'm also going to use it to create the puffin's feet in a few minutes time. If you're interested in learning this stitch and don't understand it from this video, I go into it in more depth on my embroidered tree video, which I will attach below. To add some light into the puffin's eye, I've created a little white French knot. As you can see, I have a few attempts before it actually goes right, and I thought it was important to keep this bit in the video so that you can see that even although I've had lots of practice, I still don't get it right every time. So just keep working at it and have fun with it. Here I'm just using the same technique as I did for the puffin's feet on the belly. I've done an outline using backstitch, and then I fill in that area with the satin stitch. It's a very small satin stitch, but it's still a satin stitch. And then I go back into the satin stitch to fill in any gaps at the very end. And there you go, that's how you transform any design into a piece of textiles art. If you've made it all the way to the end of my video, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like, comment below and subscribe to my channel for more. See you next time.